Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. It is the Juan Soto era in New York, just a different side of it now. Welcome to the stream everyone, or for those watching a little bit later on YouTube or listening on podcast form. Wherever you may be getting this, thanks for hanging out with us here today. Coming up, like I said, Juan Soto is now a member of the New York Mets. I didn't think I'd be saying that, to be perfectly honest with you. We will talk about that. We will look at what it means for the Mets, the Yankees, and I got to throw my Blue Jays in there as well. Plus, a recap of everything that went down in the National Football League, UFC 310 recap, and we'll get ready for WWE RAW this evening. So, we have a lot of ground to cover. Let's get right into it and chat some baseball. So, the New York Yankees lose out on Juan Soto as he stays in New York, but instead heads over to the Mets. It's a 15-year deal worth a lot of money. $765 million. Good Lord. I didn't think this would happen. I genuinely believed that Juan Soto was going to stay in New York and he was going to be a member of the New York Yankees. Because it fit, right? Like he had proof of concept. It worked very well for them. They make it to within a couple of games and probably a couple fielding gaffes of the World Series, of a World Series championship. Like they were in the World Series against the Dodgers there. He obviously had a phenomenal season out in New York. We all went over why it made so much sense him playing in New York, and with the Yankees at Yankee Stadium because of the ballpark dimensions and everything like that. Like it all, legacy-wise, every little bit of it lined up with Juan Soto going to the Yankees. And then in the end, Steve Cohen did what he said he was going to do. He was going to go out there, he was going to flex his financial might, and he was going to be the one who was going to bring Juan Soto to, or not just Juan Soto, but bring superstars and bring that Dodgers-like quality to the New York Mets. And he has done it now. It is unbelievable that this is happening, and there's just so many different ways to go about looking at this particular thing. Let's start on the Juan Soto aspect of it, because obviously when this happens, social media reactions flying off the handles, right? People burning jerseys, which, I mean, yeah, that's devastating, I'm sure. But there's just so much to really dive into with this. For Juan Soto, it kind of drives home. Like he was going to go to the highest bidder, and the Mets were that. And that was what this whole thing kind of came down to. And that's why some people were kind of talking about the Blue Jays as the ones who could get it, because they were going to go to $700 million. And that was apparently about 10% short of what they needed to get to. And we'll get to Toronto here in just a second. But for Juan Soto, this is now an opportunity. And one of the things I saw last night is, this guy just didn't care about his legacy. It's like, no, the legacy he cares about is that his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren are going to be living in a mansion on Mars because this guy has been making all this money for 15 years and all the opt-outs and everything like that. But that this guy is, like, the legacy that he is going to leave behind is one of absurd amounts of generational wealth. That's what he cares about. And also, I think if we want to look at a baseball legacy here, the guy won a World Series with the Washington Nationals when no one thought that was, like, they came out of nowhere. And then he does that and goes to the Padres. Like, he hasn't taken the conventional route in any of this. So why did we think that the conventional legacy part of it, where he would need to set that legacy with this one team, would be anything to him? Also, he's got 15 years now to figure out that course of action. You know, like Gary Carter set a pretty good one with the Mets. Sorry, Expos fans. Carlos Beltran had that tarnished a touch. But like you can set a legacy with teams that aren't the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Red Sox. You can do it very easily with the Mets, and he's going to have 15 years to do that. And so, like, for him, that this is it's a real statement. And now I don't think this guy feels much in terms of pressure. He obviously handled it very well in New York when it was kind of solely placed on him to try to go out and win a World Series for a Yankees team that hadn't even been there in 15 years, which for them is basically a Cubsian drought. And so now he is going to be kind of tasked with being this superstar that brings all this attention to the Mets. And we have seen attempts like this by, with all due respect to the Mets, and I've always kind of liked the Mets. You know, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Mets, but we have seen a number of times the younger brother or the second fiddle team, to be a bit more harsh about it, try to go out and make these types of big moves, and it doesn't really work, right? Like the Clippers tried to do it with Kawhi George and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and tried to do all that, right? Like the Mets have tried this before, and look, like the Mets have had some success, right? But they have tried to make the big splashes and do all this, right? The Brooklyn Nets trying to do that with Kevin Durant and everything, and a lot of times it doesn't really work. But I do think that Cohen is going about this in a smart way as we kind of transition now to what this means for the Mets. Like, he has always kind of said he wants to be the Dodgers of Major League Baseball, and I think a lot of people just assume, oh, that means he wants to buy a championship, and it's like, well, yes, but I do think he wants to be at least remotely smart about it, right? And that's why when it wasn't working a couple years ago, it's like, yeah, trade everything. What do we care? Retain all of the salary. We can do that. And you can get a couple of other prospects, and you get an Acuna and stuff like that. Not that one, but the other one. You can use that financial muscle to benefit you when it comes to prospects now, too. And so they don't have the same kind of pipeline that the Dodgers have, where it's just one guy goes out and says, okay, well, now there's this other top prospect who's going to hit 35 home runs. No, you've never heard of him, but he's going to come up, and he's going to have some big hits in World Series games and stuff like that. That is more the Dodger method. And so the Mets want to try to do that. And when you look at the projected lineup for this team, there are a few young pieces in it that you think can contribute right away. So they have obviously jumped the line a little bit now with Juan Soto. It is going to be up to them now to fill around this. And this is why one of the reasons why I ultimately think Soto goes to the Mets is the Mets can do this and then keep going. Right? Like, that's what it was with the Dodgers, right? It wasn't just, okay, we got Ohtani, great, off we go. Because the Blue Jays could have done that, but what are you going to do around it now? And I think that is where some of the criticism of the Yankees may be a little bit more valid, because they can go out and spend on Juan Soto. They tried. They gave it all they could. They didn't cheap out on the Juan Soto part of it at all. But the Mets now, like, if they sign Pete Alonso tomorrow, are we going to be surprised? No. We're going to laugh about it. We're going to make some jokes about it. But this is a team that's going to keep spending and going to keep trying to get better. I have a feeling that the Yankees would go out and get Juan Soto and be like, well, fuck, what do we do now? We're kind of stuck here, and try to nibble at some of the edges the way that they have been doing for a long time. And so for the Mets now, this is the big piece, but it cannot be the only piece. There has to be some other parts around it now. I would say specifically in the starting rotation that you need to build around it with. And I think they will do that. They already went out and acquired Clay Holmes, and apparently the thought is he's going to be in the starting rotation. So they are going to need to add a few more pieces around this. Does this make them the favorites in the National League? I would still say no. I think it makes them probably the best team in the National League East. But I think that there's going to be some adjustments now to be made to get this team into that Dodgers category. On the Yankee side of things, I would anticipate a free agent spending spree that kind of mimics that of a drunken sailor. For those watching out of market, I was on Sportsnet 960 The Fan this week and chatting with Adnan Virk about it. And I said, like, from a Blue Jays standpoint, one of the things I worry about is all these free agents that the Jays are in, like an in-person meeting with Corbin Burns, going after Anthony Santander, looking at Max Fried, like they're doing all of these things. The Yankees now become the favorites to get all of them because they just okayed spending $750 million over the next 16 years. I think are fine divvying that up because Juan Soto was not the only need that this team had. There are some holes that this team needs to plug. That offense in the World Series and in the playoffs, really, like it wasn't good enough. And part of, like, Glaber was actually doing okay, and he's probably gone. Soto was getting on base and table setting, but no one else was doing anything. Like, Rizzo is gone at first base. Chisholm is going to have one of second or third kind of locked down. You need the other one there. Outfield, like they have Dominguez, I guess outfield's probably okay, actually, with Judge, Dominguez, and Verdugo. They're probably all right there. But offensively, like, you need at least one more big bat in this offense, and then a couple of infielders just to be able to field a professional baseball team. I think Volpe's fine at shortstop. I don't think that's going to be an area that they look to address. But this is a team that has some holes. The bullpen is simply not good enough. I think the starting rotation could probably use a bit of an upgrade as well, because there's a lot of people that you're relying on that you're not overly comfortable relying on. Juan Soto, I do think, kind of masked a few things that the Yankees need. And I think that this understanding that they need to spend money now is going to lead to, I think, a very aggressive approach in free agency and kind of get back to what we are used to with the New York Yankees, where they are comfortable spending and spending and spending and spending and spending and going off after that. And so I think that this is going to be a team now that is going to allocate, what would that would, like $46 million a year they were going to spend on Juan Soto. I think they spread that over a couple of dudes now and fill a few of these holes on this roster. And I think we see a very aggressive approach here from the Yankees. I do have to comment on the Blue Jays. They are my favorite team. I make no bones about that on here. For Toronto, I don't think it was ever super serious that the Blue Jays were going to get him. And that was one that I was not allowing myself to really get into. The good thing about it is that it doesn't really seem like a whole lot of the market has shifted in this time. Like, you remember around the Ohtani thing, which a lot of those memories coming up in this last little bit. But the big one for the Jays was Candelario, and he had signed, and there was a couple other pitchers, I believe, that had signed, and now the Ohtani thing happens, and it's like, well, shit, there's no one else around. Free agency has basically not even started yet, and this move happens. And so I do think that there is a pivot for the Blue Jays, and a lot of people are going, okay, well, let's see what plan B was. And as I just stated, the Yankees were perfectly fine allocating a lot of money to try to make this team better. I think they're going to keep spending. I think the Red Sox have made it very clear that they are going to keep spending now in this market. And so I don't think plan B is going to be good enough for Toronto. I think there needs to be a plan C, and I think that C needs to be standing for creative. I think the Blue Jays are going to have to get a little bit creative to help out with the vast improvements that this ball club needs. I am not so confident now in a Max Fried or a Corbin Burns or a Anthony Santander going to the Blue Jays at this point. I think that there are going to need to be, whether it be trades or finding a few bargains, that this team is going to have to try to work with. And sometimes they've done well on that front, and sometimes they've done very, very poorly on that. And I think last year was a big case of that. But Juan Soto was not going to fix every issue that the Blue Jays had. He was barely going to fix one of them. But there are now a lot of very desperate teams, I think, entering the market that can match the Blue Jays' desperation and also match them in terms of what they can offer financially. And the Blue Jays are going to have to, I think, get very creative with it. The other aspect of it is I would be, unless it comes with an overpay, I would be stunned if the Blue Jays re-sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. now. I think that this is going to be a player that sees what has happened in the last couple of free agencies and at least wants to test those waters out. And it leads to a lot of really interesting discussions, I think, around Toronto, with both Bo and Vladdy probably coming up in the next little while. What does this mean for the Blue Jays now? And what do you do if this season doesn't necessarily go the way that you want it to? I still think you have a very good chance of re-signing Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if this thing does go to free agency, although the last couple of seasons don't necessarily add to that all that much. But I do think that there is a real opportunity for the Blue Jays to re-sign him. I just think it's going to have to come at the winter meetings next year. And if this team is hovering around 500 and are 6 games out of a playoff spot right around the trade deadline, with that looming over, it's going to be it would take a lot of stones to not trade Vlad and try to get something back for him, and risk losing him in free agency for draft compensation or whatever that may be. So it would be, it's going to be, I think, a very tense little while here out in Toronto. And once again, I have stated before, and I will state again, I have exactly zero confidence in the people running this Blue Jays team right now. So that is the story from Major League Baseball. In the National Football League, another Sunday is in the books, and the best continue to somehow stay on top, and a few other teams are really finding that they're in a lot of trouble. Let's talk about the NFL story after another busy Sunday. So, the National Football League is basically done with another week. We have one more game to go tonight, and it is not one of great importance, even a little bit, with the Bengals taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Let's start in the AFC, as the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football somehow, someway survive again, as a field goal doinks in a doink for the division, as Mike Tirico so properly proclaimed on Sunday Night Football. But they just keep doing it, and I'm going to keep buying it. I know that this is similar to the Eagles from last year and to all these different teams from all these different times, and yes, it's a lot has been lost by teams who barely squeak by in the regular season and then go to the playoffs and lose. But this team is different. It is Mahomes. It is Andy Reid. It is the most talented football player maybe in the history of the sport at that quarterback position. And so, yeah, a lot of these wins are very fluky. But this is still the two-time defending Super Bowl champions with the best player in the world out there. And I think they are getting better. I think DeAndre Hopkins is really fitting in with this offense very, very well. I think Pacheco getting back in is very interesting. And now apparently Hollywood Brown is working his way back out. I think a lot of these weapons that they were relying on at the beginning of the season are kind of either being replaced or starting to work their way back into the lineup. And that makes this a very dangerous football team. The one, I think, legitimate point you can make about this group, because we haven't even talked about the defense, which is all world still, right? Like, they are one of the best defensive units in the NFL, and so that is why they are winning a lot of these games when the offense can barely put up 20 points a night. But the thing that does give you the most pause is this offensive line is really leaky, and you are going to be facing some good, you saw it, you're going to be facing the Chargers probably at some point in the playoffs maybe. The Buffalo Bills had some success there. You're going to be dealing with some just vicious pass rushes. If the playoffs end up with the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers, they got like 9 guys who can get after the quarterback, and that's going to be a real problem for this unit to try to block for Patrick Mahomes and kind of keep him upright. So there are, I think, major concerns in Kansas City, but in terms of they can't keep doing this. Sure they can. We learned this last year. This is the most vulnerable Kansas City has been. They're playing on the road in the first time. Look at the offense just seems off. It just hoisting the Lombardi Trophy at the end of it all. We need to learn this lesson here. Moving on, the Pittsburgh Steelers, talked about them a little bit there. They look really, really good, and this is part of the Sean Payton discussion, and maybe this is, again, just me holding on to one last little glimpse of, oh no, Sean Payton, he's actually not all that good. Holding on to one last little thing of that, because this Russell Wilson did not set foot in Denver. And now, I don't know if it is the desperation of the situation or what it is, or just not meshing, but Sean Payton couldn't get this out of that guy out in Denver, and he is looking really good. And again, this defense is one of the top 2 or 3 in the National Football League right now, and with the offense starting to really move the football very effectively and starting to put up some points, this is a team that is looking very for real right now in the AFC. They are in the driver's seat to win this division. I don't think they're going to really be competitive for a first-round bye, but they're going to at least be hosting one playoff game and be miserable to play against. They are built for January football, and I think they are going to be a real problem in the AFC. Also, the Miami Dolphins surviving, and I was big on the Dolphins coming into the season. Maybe not as big as I was a season ago, but I have been, I think, a Tua defender, and I don't know how the people who are anti-Tua have any leg to stand on anymore. Because is he perfect? No. Is he like this tank for Tua that they had a couple of years ago, that this franchise-altering quarterback? Probably not. but you see how this offense ran without him. And now you see how this offense runs with him. And it is night and day. So maybe it's a systems thing, whatever. But they trotted a whole lot of other quarterbacks out in this system, and it didn't work. And now he has got this team back and rolling. And I think that they are still going to have at least a bit of a say in the push here toward a wild card spot in the AFC in the next few weeks. The Buffalo Bills drop a real fun one against the Los Angeles Rams. And this is the one aspect of the Bills that just kind of keep me the slightest bit away from locking them in as like Super Bowl favorite or whatever, is that defense can get after it at times, but holy cow, can they give up some points and can they give up some yards? The good thing for for Buffalo is obviously Josh Allen looks like Superman, and he is connecting with Amari Cooper over and over and over again. Like, it seems like those guys have that connection now and are going to be able to put some pressure on defenses in a way that Kansas City's offense, even with some of those other guys coming in, just haven't really been able to do, with guys being able to win one-on-one in those routes and even just being open while still covered, like the one go route that Cooper had that Allen just fitted in just perfectly there. So the offensively, like, Josh Allen is putting up some unbelievable numbers, and I kind of wondered if he lost this game, do we kind of circle it back to Mahomes as MVP? But I think having 6 touchdowns in a game is probably going to keep that MVP conversation going there with Josh Allen. As far as the Rams are concerned, I still can't get a read on this team. One week they look not great, and then the next week they come out and the offense is unstoppable. And Puka Nacua is basically the greatest receiver that's ever existed. And Cooper Kupp is still putting up some stuff. And by the way, Kyron Williams can run through anybody. This is an offense that when it gets going, it is really difficult to stop. But the defense is still too inconsistent for me to fully take them seriously here in the NFC. Toxic, back for the second time. Look, we're going to be back here. It's back to regularly scheduled programming, at least for the next couple of weeks before we get into that Christmas, New Year's area. And I'm off in Saskatchewan with untrustworthy internet access and stuff like that. But where we were a few weeks ago, we're going to get back to that live stream again later on today with the Video Game World, and another live one with the podcast again on Tuesday, and then another one on Thursday with quite a bit more video game stuff to come. We'll get to that probably a little bit later on today. But yes, we're back again. That is for sure. And always love seeing Toxic pop up in the chat. Sticking in the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks really grasped control with another good win, and I am firmly believing now in this Seattle team. Geno Smith is not perfect, that is clear, but they have enough receivers around that this offense can put up some points. And with Kenneth Walker and with Zach Charbonnet, they are really able to control a whole lot. And the big thing here is this defense is getting healthier and they are getting better. And that is why I think that this is a team that, like, there is very obviously tiers in the NFC. The Lions are probably alone, although the Eagles are up there, right? Like the Eagles are hanging around. And before, it felt like, and then there's a gigantic gap, and then there's the rest of the NFC. Instead, it does feel like the Philadelphia Eagles and Detroit Lions, while it feels like they're kind of running away and hide, I do think Seattle is kind of creeping up there as a team that really needs to be taken seriously when we get to playoff time. One team that isn't being taken seriously, and I kind of understand it, but I do think we need to look at them a little bit more, is the Minnesota Vikings. Sam Darnold can turn into a pumpkin at any time. We all understand this. But that defense with Flores at control is for real. B, Addison adds another level to this offense when he was out that they just didn't have. And I think getting Cam Akers as a safety blanket behind Aaron Jones was really impactful, and TJ Hawkinson being back is helping this offense out as well. But this defense is so good and so aggressive, and I think is going to win them a few games. Like, I just think in general the NFC is maybe just a little bit tighter than we all think. And are we going to get to a point where it is going to be the it's going to be the Lions and the Eagles in the NFC Championship game? Probably. right? Very realistically. But I do think that it's not just going to be 41-3 over Seattle and 28-10 over the Minnesota Vikings in the divisional round. These are going to be legitimately challenging teams that are going to really give these teams some problems here in the postseason. But one team that's having problems now, the Atlanta Falcons. I think it's up to now 8 interceptions between touchdowns for Kirk Cousins. As this one you can understand. He played for Minnesota for so long. You can understand the throwing to the wrong jersey thing. That's just going to happen. But he doesn't look good. And I don't know what Michael Penix Jr. looks like. And I said it last week when we were just doing podcast episodes. It would take some kind of balls to go from Kirk Cousins to unproven Michael Penix Jr. in the midst of a playoff race with your season on the line in the next 3 weeks as a coach who is desperately trying to hold on to his second and maybe last opportunity as a coach in Raheem Morris. So this is a really interesting situation out in Atlanta. As far as Monday Night Football goes tonight, I don't think there's a whole lot of real impact here with the Bengals taking on the Cowboys. I do think it'll be a pretty fun football game, though. And so I think definitely worth tuning in to check that one out later on tonight. So that is the story from the National Football League. Moving into the world of combat sports, UFC 310, we said could be a star-making performance for a few people involved, and one fighter absolutely took advantage of that with a dominant performance. Let's break down UFC 310. All right, UFC 310 going down this weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Alexandre Pantoja once again proving that he is the one to beat in the flyweight division. This is a very impressive performance from the champion as he chokes out Kaya Sakura in the second round. I had said coming in that a lot of the talk about Pantoja was more excitement about people or fights that could be upcoming instead about him. We need to get excited about this guy. He is so well-rounded and just a Terminator in there, walking forward, and not in the way that we talked about walking forward in like the Clay Guida era where it's just this zombie thing and guys are sloppy, whatever. He is constantly pressuring and the stand-up is getting so much better. He was landing with those straight shots all night against Asakura in the 6 minutes the fight took place. He was landing those straight shots really effectively and really putting it on the former Ryzen bantamweight champion. And that was an area that I thought Asakura was going to be able to thrive in, was in the stand-up. But he was able to walk him down, keep that pressure on. And because of that, he was able to get entry on takedowns so very effectively. And then once he gets there, we saw it in the finish. It's a quick jump to the back, and it's immediately with the back triangle. And then it is immediately with the choke. Everything happens so quickly and so efficiently and so effectively, but none of it looks rushed. Like it looks like it is supposed to look, quite frankly. An unbelievable performance from Pantoja, and just one that really drove home for me that as we approach 2025, this is a guy that we need to take a little bit more seriously. This was his first finish in 3, and he hasn't had the most inspiring of fights, right? Like the 2 fights that he had in the first part of his title reign, one to win it, one to defend it, were against guys who he's beaten before. Steve Erceg felt like kind of a boxing mandatory one. Now it's Asakura, and we're seeing all these highlights, and you're getting the Twitter stories of him breaking guys' jaws, and it's all of this, and he just runs out and terminates that dude. And so that is why I think that there needs to be a bit more excitement around this guy going forward, because of just the well-rounded nature that he was able to, or the well-rounded nature of this victory on Saturday night was so impressive. On the Asakura side, like there's obviously power there, right? Like he landed a couple of very good knees, and the leg kicks come with great veracity, and like the hands, he wasn't able to let them go as much. And I think that was a bit of an issue, is that he wasn't able to properly handle the forward pressure of Pantoja. And now there are cars that wouldn't have been able to hold that, but the pressure that he had, there was no jab to stop that on its tracks. There was no circling around to at least slow that down a little bit. It was just a guy marching in his face, and he didn't really have an answer for it. When he did answer back, it was powerful and it was effective. And so I think that this is a guy who actually can build up a little bit of steam and probably get back to title contention in the UFC's flyweight division, just because of how well that power is going to play in this division. But it wasn't effective enough to keep Pantoja off of him for long stretches of time. So a very impressive showing, I thought, for Pantoja. As far as the rest of the card is concerned, admittedly, haven't been able to watch a ton of it. Rachmanov getting a win, it sounds like it wasn't overly impressive. I haven't been able to check it out yet, but he is obviously setting up now for a welterweight title opportunity against Bilal Muhammad coming up very, very soon. Very interested to see kind of how that fight broke down, but it does seem like Ian Gary, at least it had a pretty good showing of himself there at UFC 310. So more UFC coverage as the week goes on. Let's shift gears now to Monday Night Raw tonight as the WWE works its way towards Saturday night's main event. We got some nostalgia and a couple boxes we need to check before we get to that main event this weekend. So let's talk about it. What does the WWE need to show us tonight on Monday Night Raw to get us excited for Saturday night's main event? Let's preview Monday Night Raw. And initially, like, my first thought on what I just said is honestly not a whole lot. I am quite excited for Saturday night's main event. I think that this is going to be a really fun show, and I think they've already set a few things in motion for this particular one. But a couple of key points that I think the WWE needs to hit here this weekend. On Monday here. We need a strong follow-up from the New Day. I don't know if it's a vignette. I don't know if it's a beatdown. But this new attitude from the New Day, I think, needs to show up immediately. I don't know if it needs to be like a Brood theme or anything like that, but the follow-up, because that segment was so strong on Monday, that follow-up needs to be even stronger. So whether it's a cut to Big E in the back and he's beaten down, if it is an Obafemi debuting with them or whatever, but this new attitude needs to, I think, show up in the form of violence from the WWE here this evening. And I also think that you need to, even if it is just a whoever, like a randomly thrown together team, I think you need to have these guys on Saturday night's main event. Like, I think to take this seriously, because this could be one of your kind of headlining acts now into WrestleMania season and really start to build this thing up now in terms of a real money drawing heel act. I think that needs to be spotlighted now on NBC on Saturday night's main event. And so I think that needs to be a real focus here on Monday. Also, I'm interested to see a quick kind of Gunther Finn Balor build that isn't just, no, Dominic Mysterio won against Damian Priest. Why couldn't you? Well, now he gets a title shot. I think that we need to, I don't know how many people are going to buy Finn Balor as a legitimate title challenger, but I think that we do need to at least add a little bit more legitimacy to a Finn Balor challenge here on Monday. So probably with a win and some kind of a beatdown or promo or something after. And I'm very interested to see the final act here as we get ready for this match with Io Sky and Liv Morgan. I was saying last week that the crowd really does feel like they are getting behind Io right now, even though the tag team match wasn't perfect. I think that I'm interested to see the crowd reaction one more time for Io in this bout, and I'm very interested to see how they head into Saturday with these two, because you guys know I have forever and always been a champion of Io Shirai, Io Sky, whoever. She is one of my absolute favorite performers, and I would love to see her in the title picture right now. And I'm kind of talking myself into, well, it could make sense with a real whatever, and you can spin that into this, and then Io goes off and does that. I think there's a lot of fascination here in how they kind of build this thing up going into Saturday. So there's a few of the points that I think they need to hit as we get ready for Saturday night's main event this weekend. That's the show. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today. Coming up at 3 o'clock, we're going to be doing another, or maybe just a little bit after 3. I have a 2:30 meeting. But just right around 3 o'clock, going to be back streaming video games. Probably going to be baseball with the Juan Soto news. I'm in a baseball mood, and we got to get that thing figured out and get that thing finished. So watch for MLB The Show stream coming up at 3 o'clock today, or just around it. Follow me on social media at Primetime Klein. That's on X, on Instagram, Threads, and at primetimeklein. Whatever the fuck after on Blue Sky for all of that. Back streaming the podcast tomorrow. We're going to be looking at fantasy football waiver wire, the dumpster darlings, and a few more things. Also, it's going to be NFL power rankings, and then more video game stuff coming up on Wednesday. So keep it locked on social media at Primetime Klein. Give me a follow here so you know when I'm going live on Twitch, and I'll talk to you guys in a little bit. Have a great next few hours.